My name is Sarah. I'm 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my younger sister has hated me. Not the normal kind of sibling rivalry where you fight over clothes or argue about whose turn it is to wash the dishes. I mean the kind where every good thing that ever happened to me somehow became something she needed to destroy. The worst part wasn't Emily, it was that nobody in my family ever stopped her. If anything, they made excuses for her. She's sensitive. She's going through a phase. You know how Emily is. And my personal favorite. Sarah, just be the bigger person. After hearing that for 25 years, you start wondering if being the bigger person just means letting people walk all over you. Emily is 2 years younger than me. Growing up, we shared a bedroom, the same friends for a while, and eventually the same schools. From the outside, we probably looked like a normal family. Inside the house, it was completely different. The first time I realized something wasn't right, I was about 8 years old. I'd spent weeks making a little cardboard castle for a school project. My teacher had announced there would be a contest, and I was excited because I actually enjoyed art. The night before I had to bring it to school, I left it on my desk. The next morning, it had been crushed. The towers were flattened. The walls had been ripped apart. I started crying immediately. My mom came running into the room. What happened? I looked at Emily. She was standing in the doorway. She shrugged. I don't know. Mom sighed. Maybe the cat knocked it over. We didn't have a cat. I remember looking at my mother, waiting for her to realize how ridiculous that sounded. Instead, she told me I shouldn't accuse my sister without proof. I had to bring the broken project to school. I didn't win. Emily smiled the entire drive there. Things like that became normal. If I got a new sweater, she'd accidentally spill juice on it. If I made a new friend, she'd tell them embarrassing lies about me. If I was excited about anything, she'd find a way to ruin it. One year, when I was 12, I finally made the middle school soccer team. I came home so excited that I practically ran through the front door. I made it! Dad smiled. That's great. Emily looked up from the couch. Oh! That was all she said. The next day, somehow half the girls at school had heard that I'd only made the team because one of the coaches supposedly felt sorry for me. It wasn't true. I found out later that Emily had started the rumor because one of her friends had an older sister on the team. When I confronted her after school, she laughed. I never said that. You absolutely did. Can you prove it? I went home furious. Mom listened to both of us. Then she looked at me. Emily says she didn't do it. She's lying. Sarah, I'm telling the truth. Mom sighed. You two need to stop fighting. That became the solution to everything. Emily would do something. I'd react. We'd both get told to stop. There were never consequences, only lectures about keeping the peace. By high school, Emily had gotten smarter. She stopped doing things people could easily see. Instead, she manipulated situations. She'd tell one person I said something terrible, then tell me someone else was talking behind my back. She loved creating drama and then acting like she had nothing to do with it. Sophomore year, I was nominated for student council. A week before the election, someone created an anonymous social media account claiming I'd cheated on multiple exams. The rumors spread fast. Teachers questioned me. Friends avoided me. I was devastated. The school eventually figured out the claims were fake because there wasn't a single piece of evidence. But the damage had already been done. I lost the election. A few months later, one of Emily's friends accidentally mentioned she'd seen Emily making the account. When I confronted my parents, they looked uncomfortable. Dad rubbed his forehead. Emily said she was just joking. I stared at him. A joke? She didn't think it would get that serious. It destroyed my reputation. Mom put a hand on my shoulder. She feels bad. No, she doesn't. Sarah, there it is again. What? Be the bigger person. Neither of them answered, because they both knew exactly what I meant. By the time I graduated high school, I had already learned an important lesson. If Emily hurt me, I was expected to forgive her. If I stood up for myself, I was accused of causing problems. College should have been my escape. I chose a university about 3 hours away, not because it was my dream school, because it was far enough that I didn't have to come home every weekend. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. Nobody was spreading rumors about me. Nobody was waiting to ruin good news. Nobody was telling me to stay quiet for the sake of family harmony. I made friends who actually liked me. I joined study groups. I started believing that maybe I wasn't the difficult person my family always made me feel like I was. Then, Emily visited. She came during my sophomore year. At first I thought maybe things had changed. She offered to take me out for coffee. She asked about my classes. She even complimented my apartment. I remember thinking, maybe we're finally growing up. That feeling lasted exactly 2 days. One of my roommates came into my room looking confused. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Is everything okay with your mental health?" I blinked. "What?" She looked uncomfortable. "Your sister said you've been struggling, and asked us to keep an eye on you." I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. What exactly did she say? My roommate hesitated. "She said you've been lying to everyone, that you've been having emotional breakdowns, and that your family was worried about you." None of it was true. By the end of the week, everyone in my apartment was acting differently around me. They weren't rude, they were careful, like they thought I might fall apart at any moment. I called Emily immediately. "What is wrong with you? What are you talking about?" "You lied to my roommates." "I was worried about you." "No, you weren't." "I thought they should know." "There was nothing to know." She laughed. "I guess they misunderstood." I hung up. Then I called Mom. Her response was exactly what I'd expected. "I'm sure Emily meant well." I almost dropped the phone. "Mom." "What?" She lied. "I'm sure she didn't mean any harm." That sentence stayed with me for years. Didn't mean any harm. Apparently, intent mattered more than consequences. After college, I found a job in another city. It wasn't across the country. Just far enough away that surprise visits weren't practical. Moving into my own apartment felt like starting over. For the first time, my life belonged to me. I decorated however I wanted. I invited friends over without worrying someone would embarrass me. I built a career. I made genuine relationships. Most importantly, I stopped waiting for the next disaster Emily would create. I didn't cut my family off completely. I still came home for holidays, birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmas. I called my parents every week or two, mostly because I hoped that one day, things might be different. They never were. Every visit followed the same pattern. Emily would make some passive-aggressive comment. I'd ignore it. She'd push a little further. If I finally responded, Mom would immediately step in. "Sarah," I could practically hear the rest before she said it. "Be the bigger person." One Christmas, Emily accidentally knocked an entire plate of food onto the sweater I'd just bought. She apologized while smiling. Mom said it was an accident. Another time, Emily told several relatives I was secretly planning to move overseas because I thought I was too good for the family. I spent half the afternoon explaining that I had never said anything like that. Dad pulled me aside afterward. "You know your sister exaggerates. So why does everyone believe her?" He sighed. "It's easier if you just let it go." Easier for who? Certainly not for me. The only person who ever seemed to truly understand what was happening was my grandmother. Grandma never called Emily evil. She never insulted my parents. She simply paid attention. If Emily interrupted me, Grandma would say, "Sarah was speaking." If Emily twisted something I'd said, Grandma would calmly ask, "Is that really what happened?" She never raised her voice. She just refused to ignore reality. Sometimes I'd visit her by myself. We'd drink tea in her kitchen and talk for hours. She never pressured me to forgive people who hadn't apologized. She never told me I was overreacting. One afternoon, about a year before she passed away, she looked at me very seriously. "You know, none of this is your fault, right?" I felt tears filling my eyes. "I don't know anymore." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I do. It was such a simple sentence. But I don't think anyone else in my family had ever said those words to me. When I hugged her goodbye that day, neither of us knew it would be one of our last, long conversations. 3 weeks ago, Grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 84. The funeral was difficult, not because there was fighting, because there was silence. Emily cried more than anyone. My parents looked exhausted. I genuinely mourned the one person in the family who had always made me feel seen. After the funeral, life became strangely quiet. Then, about a week later, I got a phone call. It was the attorney handling Grandma's estate. He politely explained that the family needed to gather for the reading of the will. He gave me the date and time. I thanked him and hung up. I didn't think much about it. Grandma wasn't wealthy. She owned her house, had some savings, and a few sentimental possessions. I assumed she'd divide everything equally, or leave specific items to specific people. That seemed like the kind of thing she'd do. The morning of the meeting, I drove to the attorney's office feeling more emotional than nervous. When I walked into the waiting room, everyone else was already there. Dad stood near the window with his hands in his pockets. Mom sat quietly flipping through a magazine she clearly wasn't reading. Emily was scrolling through her phone, looking unusually confident. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, Jason, and Grandma Evelyn were already seated. Nobody said much. We exchanged awkward greetings. There was small talk about traffic, about the weather, about how strange it still felt that Grandma was gone. Then the receptionist opened the door. The attorney is ready for all of you now. We stood together and followed her down a quiet hallway. The conference room was simple. A long wooden table. A stack of folders. Several glasses of water. The attorney smiled politely as we took our seats. He waited until everyone was settled. Then he opened the file in front of him, adjusted his glasses, looked around the room, and said, "Thank you all for coming. I'll begin with your grandmother's final wishes." The attorney opened the file, adjusted his glasses, looked around the room and said, "Thank you all for coming. I'll begin with your grandmother's final wishes." The room became completely silent. He started with a few personal items. Grandma's jewelry was divided among a few relatives. Her photo albums were to be shared. A collection of old recipes was left to Aunt Linda. Everything seemed normal. Exactly what I expected. Then he turned another page. The remainder of the estate includes the residence located on Maple Street, all associated furnishings unless otherwise specified, the remaining savings accounts, and the investment portfolio. I glanced at Emily. She was sitting comfortably with her arms folded. She looked almost bored. It was obvious she thought she already knew what was coming. Honestly, I thought so too. Grandma loved both of us, but Emily had lived closer during the last few years. She visited more often than I could because of work, even if those visits were usually short. I figured Grandma would leave the house to both of us. Or maybe just Emily. It wouldn't have surprised me. The attorney looked down at the page. "These assets are left solely to my granddaughter Sarah." For a second, nobody moved. I actually thought I'd heard him wrong. Emily blinked. "What?" The attorney continued reading. "The residence, all remaining savings, and the investment accounts are to pass directly to Sarah." Emily laughed. Not because she thought it was funny, because she thought it couldn't possibly be true. "There has to be another page." The attorney calmly looked up. "There is not." My mother stared at me. Dad looked completely stunned. I was just sitting there, trying to process what I'd heard. Emily leaned forward. "No." The attorney remained professional. "Excuse me? That's wrong." "It is not. My grandmother wouldn't do that." He looked back at the document. "This is the final signed version of her will." Emily stood so suddenly, her chair slid backward. "No." She pointed directly at me. "She manipulated Grandma." The room froze. I looked at her. "What? You talked Grandma into changing the will." "I didn't." "You absolutely did. I didn't even know what was in the will." Emily looked at our parents. "Tell him." Mom looked completely lost. Dad slowly shook his head. Emily. No. She pointed at me again. She's been planning this for years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I never once discussed Grandma's will. You're lying. I'm not. You always knew how to make people feel sorry for you. The attorney quietly cleared his throat. There is one more item. Emily stopped talking. He reached into the file and removed a sealed envelope. The will instructs me to read this letter aloud immediately after announcing the estate. He looked at all of us. It is addressed to my family. A strange feeling settled over the room. He carefully unfolded the paper. This letter was handwritten by your grandmother approximately 6 months before her passing. He looked down and began reading. To my family, if you're hearing this letter, then I'm gone, and I know some of you will be surprised by my decisions. I didn't make them quickly. I made them after many years of watching this family become something that breaks my heart. Nobody moved. The attorney continued. I love both of my granddaughters, but loving someone does not mean pretending they have done nothing wrong. Emily's face slowly lost color. For most of Sarah's life, I watched her celebrate birthdays with tears she tried to hide after Emily found ways to ruin them. I felt my throat tighten. I watched school projects mysteriously get destroyed. I watched rumors appear whenever Sarah succeeded. I watched important moments become arguments because Emily could not stand seeing her sister happy. Emily whispered, "That's not true." Nobody answered. The attorney continued reading. More painful than Emily's behavior was watching the adults excuse it. I looked at my parents. Neither of them looked up. She's younger. She didn't mean it. Be the bigger person. I heard those words more times than I can count. My mom quietly started crying. Being the bigger person became another way of asking Sarah to carry burdens that never belonged to her. The attorney paused only long enough to turn the page. Then he continued. I saw Sarah apologize when she had done nothing wrong. I watched Emily tell lies and then smile while everyone searched for excuses. I watched Sarah slowly stop defending herself because she knew nobody would believe her. I closed my eyes for a second. Grandma had seen all of it. Even the things I'd thought no one noticed. Sarah never asked me for money. She never asked me for my house. She never once asked what was in my will. The attorney looked directly at me for just a moment before continuing. What she gave me instead was her time. She visited because she wanted to spend time together. She listened to my stories, fixed things around my house, brought groceries when I couldn't drive, and sat with me when I was lonely. I felt tears running down my face. Not because of the inheritance, because Grandma had remembered those afternoons as clearly as I did. The attorney continued. Emily visited too, but too often those visits became conversations about what would happen to my house someday. Emily immediately interrupted. I never. The attorney calmly held up a hand. I'm required to finish the letter. She sat back down. He continued. Emily, if you are angry while hearing this, ask yourself honestly why. If your first thought is that Sarah stole something from you, then you still do not understand the lesson I spent years hoping you would learn. Emily looked like she couldn't breathe. Nothing was stolen. An inheritance is a gift. It is not an entitlement. The room remained completely silent. I leave my estate to Sarah because she spent years expecting nothing from me except love. She received very little of that from the rest of the family, and I wanted her to know that at least one person always saw the truth. The attorney reached the final page. His voice became softer. To my son and daughter-in-law, you loved both of your daughters. I never doubted that. But love without accountability is not kindness. Every time you protected Emily from the consequences of her choices, you asked Sarah to pay the price instead. Mom buried her face in her hands. Dad stared at the table. I hope this letter is not remembered because of who received my house. I hope it is remembered because it tells the truth that should have been spoken years ago. The attorney read the final sentence. Sarah, stop apologizing for surviving. Emily, it is never too late to become the sister you could have been. The rest of you, please stop asking one child to carry another child's mistakes. Love, Grandma. The room was absolutely still. Nobody spoke. Nobody even looked at each other. After nearly a full minute, Emily finally broke the silence. She hated me. Her voice sounded small. The attorney shook his head. No. She left me nothing. She left you something. Emily frowned. What? The letter. She looked confused. He continued gently. She wanted you to understand why. Emily suddenly looked at me. This is your fault. I met her eyes calmly. No. If you hadn't always acted so perfect. Dad interrupted her. Emily. She looked at him. No. His voice was firmer than I'd heard in years. Not this time. She stared at him. You believe her? He slowly shook his head. I believe my mother. Emily looked at Mom. Mom wiped away her tears. I should have listened. Emily blinked. What? I should have listened to Sarah. Silence. I kept telling her to be the bigger person. Mom started crying again. I thought I was keeping peace. She looked at me. I was asking you to accept things that never should have happened. I honestly didn't know what to say. Dad finally turned toward me. I'm sorry. Those two words felt strange coming from him. I should have stopped it when you were kids. I stayed quiet. I saw more than I admitted. He looked ashamed. I just kept hoping Emily would grow out of it. Emily stood up. So this is all on me now? Dad answered immediately. No. She looked confused. It's on us. Mom nodded. We failed both of you. Emily stared at them. For the first time in my life, nobody rushed to defend her. Nobody blamed me. Nobody asked me to let it go. She looked around the room, almost waiting for someone to rescue her. Nobody did. Her shoulders slowly dropped. She couldn't finish. She sat back down. The anger she'd walked in with seemed to disappear. All that remained was embarrassment. A long silence followed. Eventually, I looked at the attorney. What happens now? He explained the legal process. There would be paperwork, transfers, tax documents, nothing dramatic, just the normal steps that followed any estate. We thanked him. One by one, everyone stood. The meeting was over. Outside the office, nobody rushed to their cars. We just stood there in the parking lot. Emily walked over to me. I honestly had no idea what she was going to say. She looked exhausted. I don't expect you to forgive me. I nodded. I know. She looked down. I used to think if people admired you, there'd be less left for me. I stayed quiet. I kept trying to pull you down because I didn't know how to build myself up. For the first time, it didn't sound like an excuse. It sounded like someone finally admitting the truth. I'm sorry. She looked at me. I know that's probably not enough. It isn't. She nodded. I figured. But, it's a start. She looked surprised. I don't hate you, Emily. You should. I spent too many years carrying anger. I smiled sadly. I'm tired. She started crying, not loudly, just quietly. I'm tired too. Our parents stood a few feet away. Neither of them interrupted. Neither of them asked me to hug her. Neither of them told me to move on. For once, they let the moment happen naturally. Over the next several months, things didn't magically become perfect. Real life doesn't work like that. Emily started therapy. She admitted she needed help dealing with years of insecurity and jealousy. My parents started family counseling on their own. Dad apologized more than once, not because he expected forgiveness, because he understood that one apology couldn't erase 20 years. I inherited Grandma's house. I moved into it about 8 months later. I kept almost everything exactly the way she'd left it. Her favorite chair stayed by the window. Her recipe box stayed in the kitchen. The little tea kettle we used every Sunday still sits on the stove. Sometimes I make tea and catch myself expecting to hear her walk into the room. Then I remember. But instead of feeling only sadness, I remember her last letter. She had spent years quietly seeing me when I felt invisible. She didn't leave me a house because I was the favorite. She left it because she wanted me to know that the truth mattered. People sometimes ask if the inheritance destroyed my family. Honestly, no. The lies did that years earlier. The inheritance simply forced everyone to stop pretending they didn't exist. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asked to be the bigger person. I was finally allowed to just be myself. And it turns out that was all Grandma had ever wanted for me.